All right, welcome everyone. My name is Emeka Okereke, and we are inside the conception of an artist that I admire her work, and an artist I've also had the opportunity and the honor to have conversations with, and to get a sense of some of the thinking and the impulses that that drives our work. And I'm speaking of Otobong Nkanga, who in whose exhibition we are situated now. It's almost like we are in her mind, but really it's her conception. And the exhibition, this space now is called The Taste of Stone. And it is part of the bigger exhibition that is called There Is No Such Thing as Solid Ground. And of course, all of that comes back to this whole idea of movement, and that I remember that when I was having a conversation with her, she said that we often think of, when we think about how we are situated, or how we think of, tangible matter like structures, but we hardly think of ourselves as ripples, and that we can just, what we do here affects and continues to ripple. And imagine thinking ourselves as, water, as opposed to structures and things like that. So that's a sense of, this intention to come here today. And what we are looking to achieve here is to just have a conversation about, of course, the prompt for us here is the notion of home. And 2 days ago, I was having a conversation with a photographer. We were looking at his work, and one of his texts jumped out at me. So there's the last line of the text goes, the last thing that I want to lose in life is home and family. And that was so powerful for me. And he's from Southeast Asia, you see? And of course, this resonates with me, even as an African, as a Nigerian, because this whole idea of home as a sanctuary, as something, the last thing, is like fighting with your life, to really articulate it, to hold on to it. And I think much of what we are doing, many of us, and how we are moving around, and how we're engaging, is to find that sanctuary. This is something that I have discussed also outside this context with someone like Pamela. So anyway, Otobong, knowing my work, and of course we've had this podcast together, because she spent some time here in Gropius Bau in the residency, and during which we had that conversation that now resulted in a podcast. And she invited me to do some sort of intervention here. And I thought, okay, it'd be nice to sort of like use the opportunity to connect with energies, to connect or bring energies together. I started really from a small point. And I said, let me see how it's going to go. I started with a friend called Jackie. She's not here, and I hope she's watching us now. And I reached out to her because I really loved some of the moments, that's happened in terms of connection between both of us. I reached out to her and said, I want you to come on board on this. But she didn't have enough time, so she said, but I know someone. And then she introduced me to Pamela, and I've never met Pamela. She said, but Pamela is good, So the energy started moving from there, from Jackie to Pamela, and then we started having a conversation. And that's how Pamela came into this. So we have been going back and forth since almost the first week of November. And it was this morning, really, in our conversation this morning, that I felt that all we're trying to do just come together, that we've aligned, because now but we've been going back and forth, meeting each other, trying to find a way to fit in. But I felt like this morning, wow, it's interesting. Can you imagine? So that's the sort of like energy that I have with me here now. So that's it basically. So I will just, leave it to Pamela to take it up from there.
Yes. Thank you very much, Emeka. First of all, of course, thank you for inviting me on this beautiful project. Hello, Leon. Hello, Reem. Hello, audience. We don't know you, but yeah, I'm happy that you're watching us tonight. I start with a just short introduction of myself. Yes, my name is Pamela Owusu Brenyah. I'm a music consultant, festival organizer, and also DJ. I run a platform that calls Afro Pop, which showcases the diversity of African pop culture here in Germany mostly, but also, of course, worldwide. And I'm also working a lot around music, do talks, do conversations. And maybe what was super important and super interesting for me to be here is that especially in this light of 2020, it's been a very unusual year. It's almost the end of the year. And I want this talk, or I feel this talk to be where we maybe rip off our professional persona, but more going into our personal persona or personal. We want to get to know you. We want to get to know what home means for you, home means for us. And I'm pretty sure we will find that we have a beautiful conversation. We have 3 super interesting people also here with us. And I'm very excited to hear what your notion of home is. What my notion is, we will come to that a little bit later when we have also introduced the other 2. So please, Leon, would you like to continue to introducing yourself?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me and for inviting her who invited me. I'm Leon Blau. I'm from Germany with some other background that's making things a bit more complex and interesting. I would say I do not have a clear notion of home. It's a very complicated topic for me. I'm a fashion designer, or I used to be more a practicing fashion designer. Now I'm more focusing on scholarly work in philosophy and sociology. And thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to see what energies we build together.
Hi, I'm Reem. I'm also really, really happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I've called many places home. My parents are from Kuwait, and I grew up part of my life there, but I was also born and raised in the US and lived there till I was 11. And it created this tug of war kind of between the US and Kuwait for the large majority of the beginning of my life. Until, of course, I decided to make it more complicated and moved to South America, where I lived in Colombia for 3 years. And ironically, that's where I actually started to feel a notion of home more so than I ever had in the 2 places that are more technically, let's say, my home. And then, I lived in London for a year where I was studying. I'm an urban sociologist. And now I'm in Berlin. So I've been here for about a year. And I'm also really excited to start to grapple with this question that I feel has come up for me for my entire life.
Thank you, Rima. When I think of this whole idea of home, the very first thing that comes to me is that there is always a feeling of returning to who we understand who we are. We're going forward, and we say, okay, it's sort of like a moving target, and it's ever receding, yeah? But at some point, you begin to realize that it has always been there. It has always been maybe in childhood memories, and what you have always been, that you have not really changed. That what is changing are the forms of the places and the people you meet. That time, which is something that I'm very much preoccupied with, and I'm hoping that we can also discuss this whole notion of time as something that changes. That time doesn't really change. That what changes is that we are passing through it. That time does not pass. That we pass through time. Yeah, and so I just want to use this thinking and this thought to go into asking, any of you, what sort of like memory, personal recollection comes to mind from childhood that is maybe lately recurrent, that I would say when you remember it, you feel this is something that cannot be taken away from you. No matter what is happening around you, no matter what is falling apart around you, this is the beginning of your subjectivity. This is the beginning of that who I am. And that you can even now say, oh, this has been a running thread. I don't know if this is me projecting a lot, but I don't know if you get a sense of what I'm saying. That you feel like you can always run to that place. Is there something like that? But again, if there isn't, just treat this prompt like you want to treat it, Yeah.
I think there is, and for me personally, it's actually very much connected to the senses. Mm-hmm. So when I smell something or taste something or hear something, seeing maybe is not so strong, not the strongest effective sense for me. Mm-hmm. But so, for example, from the childhood, when you eat something that you haven't eaten for a long time and it reminds you of how your mother cooked it at home, or music that you connect to your grandparents. For me, maybe that's mostly, it's something that is not very grabbable because I don't necessarily have a space or a physical space, a territory that I would say when I'm there, I feel at home, mm-hmm. actually, because my parents are immigrated from Israel to Germany, and their parents immigrated from Yemen and Poland to Israel. So I'm actually the third generation that was born and raised in a place where the parents were not. Mm-hmm. So it's very much connected more to the senses. Mm-hmm. Than even if I see something, it's not as strong. If I see Frankfurt where I was raised or the village of my mother, mm-hmm. Maybe it's more the scent, like what you smell, if you smell a specific tree or a specific food, for me, yeah.
I think for me, just the premise of relating memory with home is something that I'm not sure I totally lived out in my life. Because of course I have childhood memories and I have things that I am nostalgic for and remember. But I feel for me, home is something that I kind of, as I fumble through, I'm like, okay, is this it? Oh, is this home? Mm-hmm. And it kind of feels like this, what you said, like this ever receding mm-hmm. concept. And I don't know, it's funny, like recently, like everyone in Berlin, I've had to search for a new flat. And it's crazy how much it's put in contention for me, just mentally. Like how much I realized I was associating stability suddenly with this place I was living. Mm-hmm. And this is the first time in very long that I actually have been in a place for an entire year, mm-hmm. and I haven't traveled. And it's the first place I'd say I lived kind of with like as an adult in an apartment, and not with, let's say, a family or in that sort of situation. And it feels suddenly like this thing I'm really attached to. And I wonder how much of it is suddenly feeling like, okay, now this is finally this concept of home that people talk about, and I feel it now, and I don't want to let it go. And then again it slips through like sand, and then it makes you start to wonder, okay, what is home then? And is it this constant also striving for home that's perhaps the point as well?
Well, so when you say it slips through,
Yeah.
sort of sorry, let me just interject there. When you say slips through, what happens what happens for you to feel like like it's no longer home, it's over? Like, so what tangible, like an incident, when you say I have eventually found home, and then
in this instance it's literally having to leave an apartment, right? But I think in other instances in my life, it's when suddenly like a current comes and I have to leave a place, and in the moment it makes sense, and it's only afterwards that I'm like, wow, I left, like why? And I remember when I left Colombia, when I lived there for 3 years, and I was very happy, and it wasn't until I was like, and I was studying and I was living in London, I was like, I was so happy. Like, why did I leave this first place that I really felt like was home, and people just accepted me for who I was? And I think for me, like, this home is so tied with belonging, and what does it mean to belong in a place? And yeah, I don't know. What do you all think?
I mean, if I think about my childhood, I mean, when people see me, of course, they saw a black child, and they always connected me with Africa, and probably that I was born there, and I came here as a migrant child, but I was born here, and I also grew up in a German family since I was small. So for me, I always felt, even though I was the only black person in that house, in that family, I actually really felt like I'm at home. And I would even say till my 16th or 17th year, I never questioned not being German. I felt like all my students, all my friends, I had a different skin color, but I still felt like everybody. In my life, we went through the same stages. Is a school, is a kindergarten, is going to a doctor, is eating maybe a fish stäbchen or something, that what people children eat. So I really, for a very long time, thought I was born in Hamburg. Hamburg is my home, and that's where I come from, that's where I'm born, and that's who I am. But I would say, not even the first time when I touched African soil, I would say maybe the second one, that's when I started to question home, but also who I'm actually are. It has also, of course, to do with, when you grow older, you read, you learn, you go to university, you have started to have interest, you read into things. But yeah, that's when slowly, really slowly, I really saw myself as a person who has two cultures. Then I have a home looking left, and I have a home looking right. And yeah, and of course, I mean, we will come to that later, but home, when I look in the past 10, 15 years, I could have been home everywhere. Maybe because also my family was spread all over the world. There were parts in Africa, some in Europe, some in the States. For me, it was like, oh, I can travel there. And for that moment when I was maybe my family, that was home. I was really a very free spirit. I was like, I go where I find something that I really enjoy. But I can be here for 2 years, I can be there for 2 years. And I've never really, by that time, actually missed also one place that I call home. For me, I always felt like I'm a person of, many belongings, many interests, curious about what elsewhere is.
And now you have a place, because you said it used to be that way. Now
this year is special. Usually I travel, we travel so much that and I always felt the need, I need to travel. I cannot just stay at one place.
I think this year forced a lot of us to contend with that and just to stay put.
Yeah. And even maybe invest more in your apartment.
Exactly.
To make it feel like, okay, you actually do not have to leave
This year I really
it.
made a home in many senses. In really, and I feel like, and I'm very thankful that I'm in Germany, that I know that I'm privileged. I know what kind of luck I have to be here, and that I have a place. I mean, I can go home, I have my own apartment, water is running. If I want to be outside, go outside. So having your own place this year was really important and very special and felt different than it ever have had before. And yeah.
It's interesting. There's something I'm going to come to that I picked up that I want to ask you, but I also don't want to forget responding to Leon's idea of smell. I often think of it. I often say that time has a kind of smell. Like sometimes I'll be walking, my neighborhood here in Berlin, in Neukölln, the bridge there, the canal, and the smell of the wind, the rain, hits me, and it takes me all the way back to a particular moment, in time. And a place really immediately conjures an image of me just walking, as a boy, back, back in Nigeria, in the eastern Nigeria where I grew up in. But it's exactly the same smell, because it's the smell of the rain mixed with dust, because it has a peculiar, So I was like, wow, and it's really for a moment. And it's so interesting how that connects you more than anything else. And then, sort of like forms this, bridge or line that is not an imaginary one in any way. You can't say, it transports you immediately. It's really like a visceral way of being here and elsewhere. I just want to respond to that.
Yeah, and it transports you, I think, in a way that is totally untangible. I mean, it's nothing fixed, like you can't, it's very emotional, it's very much connected to affectivity, so it's a strange memory. I mean, it's a strange sort of memory, I think, if it's coming from the senses, and suddenly you just have this feeling you had as a child or whenever. Yeah.
Actually, this is a perfect kind of made me think of this poem that I brought. So you asked us to potentially bring something that makes us think of home, and I think home for me, if we do associate it with this kind of feeling of being somewhere else and here simultaneously, I think this really brings light to that. And I chose this poem for two reasons. It's by Khalil Gibran, and I'll speak about those two reasons after I read it. So it's actually from the first chapter of The Prophet. So it's one of his, I guess, seminal books, one of his most famous books. So, Al-Mustafa, the chosen and the beloved, who was a dawn unto his own day, had waited 12 years in the city of Orphalese for his ship that was to return and bear him back to the isle of his birth. And in the 12th year, on the 7th day of Lilul, the month of reaping, he climbed the hill without the city walls and looked seaward, and he beheld his ship coming with the mist. Then the gates of his heart were flung open, and his joy flew far over the sea, and he closed his eyes and prayed in the silences of his soul. But as he descended the hill, a sadness came upon him, and he thought in his heart, "How shall I go in peace and without sorrow? Nay, not without a wound in the spirit shall I leave this city. Long were the days of pain I have spent within its walls, and long were the nights of aloneness. And who can depart of his pain and his aloneness without regret? Too many fragments of the spirit have I scattered in these streets, and too many are the children of my longing that walk naked among these hills, and I cannot withdraw from them without a burden and an ache. It is not a garment I cast off on this day, but a skin that I tear with my own hands." And I chose this poem for two reasons. One is when I found it, I was kind of like trying to scavenge for a way to articulate what I was feeling when I was leaving. Like when I was leaving university, like when I was leaving this place that I had called home for 4 years in North Carolina in the U.S. And And it was such a complicated feeling because it was this place that was essentially transient because it was associated with my education. But then also it was a place that I, like, especially the lines of, too many fragments of my spirit that I've scattered in these streets, and too many are the children of my longing that walk among its walls. And I think a home, for me, that's when I started to also grapple with the fact that perhaps it's more abstract, and perhaps it's this feeling that, it is this feeling, right? It's the same feeling that perhaps you were referring to when you were talking about walking down, walking down by the bridge in Neukölln. And I think the other reason for me I chose it was because it was also an attempt to kind of grapple with this externally imposed notion of home that I felt society was constantly asking of me, which is being an Arab woman and saying, and so I'm like, oh, I really don't know many Arab poets, especially at the time. Now I know many more, but it was Khalil Gibran is the one that everyone kind of refers to, you know, and especially me living in the US and me trying to understand, okay, what does it mean to be Arab? And finding his poetry was like this first notion of trying to understand what home, as in like where I come from, where my heritage is, where my family, where my blood comes from, trying to build a relationship with that. So yeah, I don't know if you have, if that, any parts of that poem touched you guys.
I would have loved.
Yeah.
You can, if you want to add something to her, you can first, and then want to say something to you.
Yeah, I mean, there were words that very resonated. I think the word scattering, for example, and the word that you were using, abstract, which I think brings it actually, especially today in the 21st century, it's a very abstract, for me personally, a very abstract concept, home.
You know, sometimes I ask myself, abstract for us, if home is more abstract for us because we have maybe a second, we could say culture or identity. You know, we are sometimes with one foot here in this culture or this home, and then maybe for a few weeks we have our feet in our other home. Yeah. And so for us, it is, I would say, who has these stories of, for example, Africans who have been traveling on the continent, yeah, but also then leaving the continent. Now I'm wondering if people who, my German friends here, if home is for them also so abstract. I think there could be a difference for people, who have more identities and more cultures and more homes, and maybe also people who travel a lot could maybe also grasp what we are saying. But I think sometimes when I talk, I remember when I left Düsseldorf and I went to Berlin, and my friend said, Pam, why are you leaving? You have everything here. Just coming out from my German friend. And, you know, I was really thinking, I'm like, somehow she's right. You know, I have a home, I have friends, I have work. I have actually everything, but still I feel like I need to go somewhere else. And she could really not understand why I had to leave.
Why do you think it was the case for you?
For me?
Mm-hmm. That you had to go somewhere else. That you had to go somewhere else.
I mean, I came from Düsseldorf, if I should go. Not sure if I get too deep to it, but I felt like, I had a short travel actually once to Berlin, and what I really liked about the city is I saw people who you could really see they lived, they went through stories, they have so much to say, so much to tell, they have been experienced so much, and I only felt this after being here for 2 days. So when I came back to Düsseldorf, to be really honest, you know, I walked into the tram again, and everybody just looked like as if life was easy. You know, it doesn't matter if you're old or young, you were always, like, everything was perfectly on people. And I was like, this cannot everything be to life. There must be more. There are so many other stories that I really need to get to know. And yeah, that's why I think I travel a lot. Mm-hmm. I love to really get into cultures, get into stories, to understand what is around me. And maybe this also has something to do to understand who you are. Maybe I was kind of looking for what is home, who I am, through stories and experience of other people, where you can then see, oh, does this fit to my feeling, my emotion, my story? So, yeah.
I think that's why, going back to the notion of abstraction that you said first, it's because home is not, I mean, very often people think it's a physical place, like when you talk about Düsseldorf or Berlin, or if you talk about your German friends, but home is not house, right? Or it's not land, it's not something that actually exists somewhere, physically, materially, that we can see it. So the word home itself is already a mental state, let's say. I mean, you could debate this, but
Yes, I would debate this.
Yeah, I mean, I would say so as well. But you bring up something that I'm actually really curious to hear what you all think of. Do you think there is these kind of two types of people in the world, like the wanderers and the people who stay put? Because for me, I would consider myself maybe in the former, like a wanderer, if there is that distinction. And I think it's part of it is mainly just, I don't know, something in the spirit, or maybe because just being born in a place where you immediately, my parents weren't from the US and I was born in the US, and immediately there is this otherness. But I think on the other hand, I think I could have been also very happy moving to Kuwait, living in Kuwait. My family lives there now, getting a job, but there is this constant, insatiable appetite to like leave. And I wonder if so much of that has to do as well, at least for me, is I was conditioned always to imagine real life is happening somewhere else, especially living, let's say, in the Middle East, or living in places that aren't your traditional European or Western areas. And watching movies, the education I had, I was always looking towards somewhere else, like Europe, US. And I feel like I was mired with a certain level of dissatisfaction with staying put, as if it wasn't enough if I just stayed in Kuwait. So I'm curious if any of you relate to that.
I think that, when first of all, the poem's really, powerful and compelling, especially the part that says, I think something like, it is not my garment that I'm shredding here, but it is my skin that I'm tearing apart. And I like this sort of like correlation between garment and skin. It is not this thing that is acquired. It is not this thing that I can take off in the morning and put on at night. That this is something that is close to home. You know how we say second skin? Or like it becomes your, second skin, or it becomes, I mean, I think there's that talking about shredding that person that you are and opening it up, And talking about this whole idea of abstraction, home as abstraction, I need to think maybe the reason why we say it's abstract is simply because we are still grappling with the many forms they confront us, that we are not conversant with the ways of reading those ways of being. Like, for instance, we have just connected with one now, which is through smell. And that could just transport you regardless of where you are. Regardless of whether you're in Berlin, where it has all this history and all that, and all the tensions that we know that exist. But something happens and it connects you. It just goes through all of that and connects you to a certain time that you have been carrying. So in other words, I feel like, at least that's how I am looking at it, I feel like the articulation of it, you are carrying it all the time. And you find it in many things around you. But it's always been inside of you. And I begin to wonder if it is not so much a function of the fact that there are people who are born at crossroads. The whole notion of crossroads. Chinua Achebe, the Nigerian writer, the author of Things Fall Apart. But he's also written other works, like intellectual works. So he talks about this whole idea of being born at crossroads. And that even in a place like Nigeria, we think, you think that this is when you were born in Germany as by an African parent or African parents, you're born at crossroads. No, you can actually be born at crossroads in a place like Nigeria, where there are so many other cultures. It's already a multicultural place, yeah. And he said, I was born at a crossroad. And that for me, that's like a signifier of, duality that cannot be resolved. That the whole idea is not to resolve it. And that is the nature of it. I don't know how you respond to this whole idea of, not seeing this as abstract, but rather it is something that just cannot be resolved, and that it is a function of being born at a crossroad.
One thing to this, actually, you yourself are the resolution. Mm-hmm. Your existence means that the duality can become one, or can be unified into one being, let's say. But I totally agree with you.
Unified?
Well, unify is the wrong word, let's say.
When you wrote your song.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's say unify is the wrong word. But you yourself as a being who is, who brings a lot of different pieces together and different crossroads. It doesn't even have to be only like a duality, it can be multiple. But us living in the way that we are living, or being like a physical being that shows people around you that this is actually possible, to be a crossroad yourself. That's really interesting, actually. And also, I think, it's maybe a new, maybe not new, but it's a specific consciousness that is very valuable, especially today, I think. And I absolutely agree, it doesn't have to be that you are actually an immigrant, it can be everywhere, because you can belong to different groups everywhere you are from.
Yeah. And I was just, we're all in Berlin here. Yeah. And I'm wondering how we are in our everyday, dealing with this whole idea of waking up in the morning, and you have to just put together your own self. And here, self, I use it in the sense of your agency, your subjectivity, this is my day, and this is what I'm going to make of it, and all of that. Can you sort of like give a sense of how it works for you, and if possible, we'll use some anecdotes,
Yeah, I think
I love the pause.
No, it's a great question.
Anecdotes.
It's a great question, because I think we can easily kind of stay on this kind of these more abstract notions of what home is, and then how we actually live it out is the day-to-day. And I think you bringing that up is really important, because I think for me it's like there's only specific moments where it's really, like here in Berlin, for example, and I think part of the reason why I've stayed in Berlin for so long is it's something that I haven't had to contend with as strongly as when I lived in some other places. Like when I lived in the US, I felt constantly that I was an Arab Muslim woman walking around, and I always had to offer an explanation or justification. And I think in Berlin that also happens, but in very different ways. And I think in the day-to-day, it almost feels like the other day I was in an art exhibit, and it was like a photography exhibit. And I wish I could remember the name of the artist, but I just remember seeing a photo of 3 women from Iran wearing a hijab in a window in the car. And for some reason, it just took me to certain parts of my childhood in Kuwait, looking out of a car window. And I think so much of my childhood, represents just looking out of a car window and just dreaming, looking at the world, imagining things, like from long car rides home, just allowing myself to daydream. And also seeing those women made me so sad, actually. And it actually made me so scared that in any moment, this life that I feels like I'm borrowing somehow in Berlin will be taken away, and I'm going to have to go back to that car window, and all of it will seem like this dream I had. And I think this is the fragility that I sometimes feel with the concept of home. And I wonder why it is that I feel that it could be snatched away. I'm not really sure.
So that's an interesting one, and in fact, it actually goes beyond the scope of this. It's really, really an interesting question there. Why do you feel it can be snatched away as opposed to, I own it. I own this experience. It's me. It's me standing here, but it's also me that in that car, right?
Yeah, I would say that really makes Berlin a special place, because that what you were just saying, that's why I feel that Berlin is or will maybe always be my home, even though I wasn't born here. But as you meet so many people at different points in their life with different stories, and I have the feeling sometimes Berlin, this doesn't really matter where you come from. You are now here, you are Berliner, and we all make the best of it. We want to get to know each other. We want to get to know the other stories.
At least in
I think
Neukölln.
tourism. Oh yeah, maybe. I also live in
Kreuzberg.
Neukölln. That's true. Oh my God.
Neukölln and
That's
Kreuzberg, I
super
think
true.
that's it.
Yes. That is super true. I also wanted to say, when you said abstract, what directly came to mind was also imagined. I think as people who also have the means to, have a TV, have a radio, have books, we are constantly exposed to, imagine other places, imagine other homes. And that's why I would contest by saying that for everybody, home is not something fixed. I think there are people who cannot imagine something else than where they are. I could imagine someone, I know you said Nigeria. Nigeria is a very vivid place, but there are also other villages where you might, as a small child, never come out. You will never see anything else. You have never, no, this is a bit too much, but not, maybe you don't have a TV, you don't have a phone where you can constantly see images of other places. And that's where maybe when you would ask him home, he would say home is really fixed to that point where he actually lived, because he cannot even imagine to maybe travel somewhere else. So, I just wanted to contest that it's not for everybody. I think something that is abstract, I think for some people it's really their soul.
In other words,
that's their...
It's a luxury sometimes, no?
Yeah.
Sometimes that's what it actually feels like, but maybe not.
Yeah, so you think that sometimes it's a privilege to sort of feel like you have homes everywhere and can move around.
To imagine different places, to imagine different homes. Imagine that you can go somewhere else where you can actually feel that there could be your home.
Okay.
Some people don't.
Yeah, I think it's a double-edged sword, though. I think in some senses it's an absolute privilege. Like I feel so privileged that I've gotten to live in so many places and meet so many kinds of people, and it's given me this ability, like what you're talking about, to not be confined to one space or one identity, but kind of exist in that in-between. And that gives you a lens into seeing people and interacting with people that I think is different. So I think it's an absolute privilege. But at the same time, and also in my end, it was largely by choice, like moving around. And for many people who also grapple with this notion of home, it's not by choice. And that's also something to think about. But I do think even me, with these privileges, sometimes I'm like, what would it be like if I just sometimes I'm envy of friends who are just really happy living in this one place, having their friends from high school, and I'm like, wow, that is so nice as well, and it's something that I will never have.
But I would say it's a privilege somehow, but I also understand it also has a downside. It could be like heaven and kind of hell, because there were years where I had constantly the feeling I had to move. I cannot be here. I don't feel like home. I need to go somewhere else. And even when I was in Berlin or in Germany for a few weeks, I feel like I need to go. So you always have this urgency in your body that you need to leave. And for a long time, I would say it's not always a good feeling, actually. Sometimes this also really makes you feel sad, because you feel like you want to be somewhere else. So it is a privilege, but on the other side, it could also be the opposite.
Interesting.
Exactly.
Leon, still want to come back to this idea of the everyday, the Berlin, like how you deal with everyday home in the everyday. Like, what are the anecdotes that sort of makes you feel, okay, I am navigating this space where I am collecting pieces of impulses or experiences that make me feel at home.
I think actually this year probably changed a lot, like you said it before, that now it's just living at home.
It's just you and your home.
Yeah, but I mean, no matter how abstract I talk about it or I feel about it, one very important thing that I realized for myself was when the pandemic was about to start in Europe, let's say, beginning of March, and I was in London for my studies, but I was subletting my place here. As soon as it started, and I knew that lockdowns are coming, I was like, I have to go to Berlin. I do not want to stay in London. I'm going to be stuck in my place.
Your place, but not your home, yeah?
Yeah, in my home, yeah. And it was the first time where I realized that it is tied to a physical place, especially in moments of, let's say, crisis, where then maybe you go back to the history of what homes are or where, which is a shelter place, where you want to shelter and feel safe. Where I knew that I feel in Berlin much safer than in London, where I was and am not trusting the government and things like this.
So safety plays a role in sense of home.
Yeah, in a moment where I had to stop thinking about it in abstract ways, then safety was definitely a factor, yeah, for sure, in this moment, yeah.
So, I mean, we have sort of like been told that to round up, but I just want to, ask this, Pamela, you've said that, this whole idea of home sometimes can be a privilege, but it's not as well, and I agree with you, that position. But whatever the case, we know that no one is free from, tension and troubles, and so can you sort of like give a sense of how your idea of home, or what you call home, sanctuary, is threatened every day? Just one example.
Sun,
Threatened.
warm weather.
How does it threatened?
How it's threatened.
Yeah?
How it's threatened.
Yeah. Especially with you now feeling like, oh, this can be snatched away.
I think for me it's a range of things. I think part of it is like the very weight of family being far away, and when that will begin to feel unbearable, and wanting to be closer to family and having to potentially build a home in a place like Kuwait, which is where my family is, that I don't have any relationship with otherwise in a way. At least I've since my childhood. And the other factor, I think, it's like I'm afraid of myself in a way, my future self, and this moment of becoming
Future
dissatisfied, and I do wonder if this is like a feeling that is a reoccurring thing, and it's like, okay, I'm ready to leave now, okay, and I actually sensed it coming up in Berlin. I'm like, wow, I'm happy here. I have good friends. I have some sense of stability. Why is this feeling creeping up on me again to leave again? So now I'm quelling it more, and I guess COVID really helped with that. And I'm curious. I don't know. That for me, it's both of those things.
Pamela.
I'm thinking.
Okay.
Really have to
While
say
you're
that.
thinking.
Me too, it's difficult.
Yeah.
What about
Yeah.
for you?
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
Yes.
just like for me, I think I would say it is in the many projections, of course, that one gets in a place like Berlin, Europe. At the same time, I'm at a place where I am telling myself that, I'm beginning to understand how I move. There is the map, that has been set out for you, the map of integration, the map of all of that, that has been set out for you. But then there is your own map, your own bearing, and somehow it's intersecting somewhere. You begin to understand there's a way you move. Maybe it's also understanding the way you move, but also understanding the code of the place and finding the intersection. All of this is to say that I've sort of like subscribed to this idea of always finding the sweet spot, points of intersection.
Sweet spot.
Yeah, of places, of things, of people. And every time I feel like dichotomies threaten that. Like you come to a place, it's black or white. Before you even open your mouth to say he's black, like there are all these, ossified dichotomies that does not allow encounters to happen, really, to enter. So, for instance, I find that I meet someone and I have this sort of like visceral connection with the person, but before we begin to talk, we have run into some political debate or some social, simply because we are different. And we can't just talk about, it's either we are just, wasting our time in small talks like the weather, or we are talking about serious big stuff about politics or identity politics, or before you know it, we enter this space. And I feel like I would, really love to have spaces where we can just, leave out that connections that we, and without all of these isms and all these big words coming in the way. Yeah.
For me, it's actually, it's because of the times that we ended. For me, it's a bit different. For me, it's so simple things. You cannot hear me? Okay, yeah. So for me, very simple things, or how I go through my day, what makes me happy, what makes me feel kind of home. Like all these, I don't have this at the moment so much because I only meet certain people, my friends, my loved ones. Yeah. So I don't come so much into questioning my identity. I really have to say, at the moment, I'm moving in a circle with a few people, and which I really enjoy and which I really think helped me even surviving this year, by knowing that there is someone I can just call and tell how my day was. Even when the sun is just shining, I'm happy, I feel home. You know, it's really, I think we are sometimes so complex, we want so many things, we have so many needs, and I don't know how I manage, but especially in the last month, it's stripped away from me. It's I enjoying a bit also the simplicity of things. I don't know. It's a difficult question, but for me, it's so simple. It's so close. It's friends. It's food. You know, I eat something. I'm like, oh God. I travel with food to Ghana. You know, and then all these images come. I listen to the music that I love. I'm with my heart already in Ghana, my other home. So I do things that give me a feeling of home. And yeah, that would be my question, my answer.
All right. We've run out of time. I see Leon thinking still.
Yeah, I'm actually still thinking.
Yeah. Okay.
I think we're all going to leave here thinking.
Time. It's
yes,
time. Is my answer.
We've run out of time. All right. Thank you so much, guys. We don't have enough time. We're only beginning, But, I'm happy that we are able to sort of like do this and enter this conversation. It's a complex conversation, but there's always something sort of like to unravel in all of this thinking. And I really wish that there would be spaces for us to explore such, thoughts without, burdening it with, again, yeah, you know what I mean. So
much.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, all of you.
Yes.
And so we are going to head into the second session of.
We have. Please stay on. We have a second session coming up in 12 minutes with two beautiful other people that we have invited. And we will explore more what home means for us, means for them in this beautiful stony space.
And in the meantime, Pamela is going to play some music for us.
Yes, and now I
will
give you some music from the continent.
To understand Nigeria, you need to appreciate where it came from.
In 1900, Britain officially assumed responsibility for the administration of the whole of what we now know as Nigeria from the Niger Company. And then, gradually over the years, British protectorates were established throughout the territory. In 1914, the protectorates were amalgamated into one Nigeria.
Actually, there's one additional detail that bears mentioning. In order to take over the territories from the Niger Company, the British government paid £865,000, a huge amount in 1900. So let's establish a simple truth. The British didn't travel halfway across the world just to spread democracy. Nigeria started off as a business deal for them, between a company and a government. Incidentally, the Niger Company is still around today, only it is known by a different name, Unilever. But that's another story.
It's Kelpie Vibes.
They wanna tell you, another story, story. Since 1960, then they play us why shall we go they cry forevermore? You dey penny me gaga, you dey penny me gaga, you dey penny me gaga, you dey penny you gaga. Well, we dey penny me gaga, you dey penny me gaga, you dey penny you gaga, you dey penny me gaga, gaga. They want make we all enter one corner shape you. Cause it be light and they tell me since I was a baby. All the time they go promise and fail you. It don't day with the slim then they shade you. They wanna tell you. Another story, story. Since 1960, then they play us why shall we go they cry forevermore? You dey penny me gaga, you dey penny me gaga, you dey penny me gaga, you dey penny you gaga. Well, we dey penny me gaga, you dey penny me gaga, you dey penny you gaga.
Yeah.
Classic.
Back then when I was a new youngin', shawty, you were tryna run on me. I've been going on my own. I've been doing things unknown. Said day one, you running right back. Say the drama, you running off track. It's a one life, you tell me one life. One time, you tell me one time. Open your eyes, baby. Can you be wise? Cause I'm a bride, baby. I'm on the way, I'm on the run, baby. Leave me alone, take it by now. I put you on it. Say you want chance to hold it on me. I finna hold it back. Turn you right around, take it my way. So tell me what you need from me now. I know what you need to be now. Cause I'm done with it now. No more damages now. Say, tell me what you need from me now. I know what you need to be now. Cause I'm done with it now. No more damages, no more damages. Back then when I was a baby girl, I was yours and you were my world. Tell me what you wanna do for me now. Take it down and I will hold you to run my race. Cause you run it right there. Run my race cause you take it right there. I've been down, I've been running right there. I've been out, could you take it back there? Pull up tonight, I might be risky. Buy me stomach, forget the whiskey. But you still wanna get back with me. You tryna be the one and deal with. Don't got my phone, you're not a madman. You miss the way in at the one chance. I lay my life, don't need you with me. Yeah. So tell me what you need from me now. I know what you need to be now. Cause I'm done with it now. No more damages now. So tell me what you need from me now. Don't know what I need to be
I know you want me. Every day, not only when you're lonely. Yeah, you see, you think you know me, but you don't even know nothing about me. Yeah, you see my thick thighs, lost when you look into my brown eyes. You see my lips always can make you switch sides. You never know the devil in a disguise. So why don't you stand up, baby? And tell me, do you want me on top? So let me show you. I don't need to back it up. Don't wanna hold you slow, just split you in half in my heart. I just wanna love on you, trust in you, honor you. Please do the same on your part. Be honest, you want it. I could be heartless, regardless of my conscience. Be honest, you want it. I could be heartless, regardless of my conscience. Take time, you know, stay around whenever I see back mine. Before you come my way, make sure you think twice. Look into my eyes, but I can never see eye. I can point a car, but you know I could never lie. Come through, I can show you something you can run to. When I'm finished, you'll be feeling brand new. Won't never be somebody you can run through. And I can put that in my life on time. No cap, big five, slow that, catch feels, yeah. If you make it better, then you can lie. Just be some with my time. Be honest, you want it. I could be heartless, regardless of my conscience. Be honest, you want it. I could be heartless, regardless of my conscience.
People they tell them majesty about the way your body twisting. Make me lose control in this thing, Lord. And it's all because I'm thinking of us. Don't go to me and leave us. Other bastard, I'm under your love. I don't know why nobody wants me. The Monica make it the Monica say me unique bow. This so jam me body day. We must enter one nick out. I don't want know anything we go make you kill my child. You know she say I'm for real. But you worry pé I'm beleja. Waja down, waja. Oh lo. Waja down, I'm beleja. Bongo no lawa, waja down. Oh lo. Waja down. Oh no 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 no. Oh no 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 no. Oh now pull us up. Oh no 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 no. Oh no 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 no.
Well. So we have been through this already. So this is the second session of conversation. Pamela, thank you so much for the music.
Yes, you're welcome. To
I was dancing.
shake it up a little bit.
Welcome to the second session of the Nzukota, which is coming together, an intervention within the work of Otobong Nkanga. So, as I said before in the first session, the whole idea is to basically this whole the concept of this, what we're doing here, this conversation came from I think it came more from the fact that we had this conversation. I had this conversation with Otobong Nkanga during a podcast, and there were so many things that she touched on, which also made me understand her work and come to admire her as an artist. A very powerful and compelling artist. Some of the things that she has dealt with. She talks about self-care, for instance, as a form of resistance. And I also like this idea of elasticity that she talks about, that we have, that we are not rigid, that what makes, this is how I understand it, that part of our duality is also the elasticity, that we can expand and contract, and there's so many things in between that elasticity, right? And much of how we move around in the world, interact with people, places that we've been discussing this in the first session, this whole idea of moving and looking to find home in different places, that's all a function of that elasticity. But again, that comes into play when you are confronted with pain. How do you deal with pain, and how do you, rebound? Again, this is a word that she has used in one of her poems. And how do you bounce back? This whole notion of bouncing back, and trusting in the fact that no matter how far you've stretched yourself, that you can always bounce back. So all of this, I'm hoping that we can sort of like get into in this conversation. We are using this opportunity to explore thoughts around the notion of home. What does it mean for people like us who, have very interesting trajectories, and if I should go by Chinua Achebe's, assertion that, it is like being born at crossroads. And so you're sort of like at intersection, and you have to make something out of that. So, that's it really. And I just want us to just get into it and see where we take it to here.
I would love to, our two newest guests, to give you the space to introduce yourself first. I can say my name is Pamela, and I'm super happy to have you here. But yes, people have heard me. We are interested about your stories and your notions and your meaning. So maybe we start on the left. Nora, please.
Okay, so I'm Nora. Nice to be here with you today. And yes, I'm a singer and a songwriter. And I was born and raised in Cologne, Germany. And then later on moved to France, to Paris, where I stayed for the last 5 years. Yeah, I guess it was 5 years. And now my current base is Berlin. And yeah, I guess there's like more to say to that because like these were all like stations for now, but I guess I'll pass on for now so you can introduce yourself. Would you like to?
And I have been living in Berlin for the past 4 years. I was born in Nairobi, Kenya, and I also lived most of my life there until making the big move to Berlin. So this is a point where I got confronted with the notion of home. And for me, these ideas and thoughts are constantly shifting, they're constantly evolving, changing. There's a lot that I can accommodate in this topic here. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Like we did in the first session, I'm thinking maybe the best place to start is to think of a memory, a recollection from childhood that has recently maybe become, recurrent, that you think of that makes you feel or gives you a sense of, your subjectivity, like almost like a running thread, something you bounce back to and come back again to who you are, and maybe gives you a sense of, I didn't really change. All these places changed, but I didn't change. That part that is the self, or something close to, because we don't know, right? It's a very precarious thing, like constantly moving, ever receding, but just a glimpse of that subjectivity that no one knows, or even if they know, they can't take away from you. Yeah.
I think I could directly say something to that because that's actually just happened like a couple of days ago, and this was also very surprising to me. But so we have this group chat with our family. It's like my sisters and my parents, my mom and my dad, and there's like tons of stuff going on. Everybody talks, sending pictures and so on. And then a sister of mine, I have 3 sisters, and one of them, she sent a picture of a dish she made, and it was a recipe from my mom. And it triggered so many things because that was something I didn't eat for like, I would say at least 10 years or something. And then I was like, wait a second, how did you do that? Like, I mean, how do you know how to do it? And then she said, yeah, don't you know Mom has this PDF folder for us where she put in all the recipes. And I was like, shit, yeah, I heard about this. Can you send it to me? And she was like, yes, I can. So she sent me the PDF folder, and I have to say my mom, she's a really good cook, and she took photos of all her favorite recipes and really put the description next to it. It's like a cookbook she hands out to family and friends. And I went through the cookbook and I got super sentimental just because there was like all these memories because it was my typical mom dishes basically and things that I grew up with, and now I like to cook myself and I totally want to recook everything that she put in the book. So that it's just realizing how that made me feel. Like I was really sentimental. I was almost crying for no reason. yeah, that was really touching, and to me, like seriously, yeah, feeling of home, even though I'm not right now, maybe. Yeah.
For me, I find so many of my childhood memories are blurry, like except where maybe I'm like falling but my most distinct memories have to do with singing and song. So I would, like the other day, I was just doing normal activities in the house, and a song came up that we used to sing in primary school, like during playtime. So these are the most distinct memories for me that come up every now and then. It would be songs I was singing with my mom that she was teaching me, or with my cousins. And I've also come to understand the power of music, especially in giving me this connection to a certain place, a certain time, a certain feeling. And yeah, I think, and also other forms of art, but for me especially, it has been with music and the ability of it to completely transport me, to a feeling of connection with home.
Yeah, for me also my childhood is very blurry. I cannot connect so much that I do today or that I see today to home, but a few days ago, I walked down the street and I heard an accent that reminded me of my grandfather, my parents. And it automatically, I had to turn around, looked at him, and felt like I went with my memories to me being in Ghana. And yeah, I was thinking about family, about home, and I realized that always when I hear that kind of African accent, but also, of course, more West African, Ghanaian or Nigerian, it directly makes me bounce back to...
Is it the accent or the language?
It is an accent.
Okay, it's not
Because
the language itself, but the accent.
Because if it would be the language, I would only have that feeling when I hear Ghanaians talk. But I hear this, it's, we Africans have a specific
way, yeah,
accent. And the moment I hear an accent on the streets, I automatically react to it, and it really reminds me of home in Ghana, home of family in Ghana, the time that I spent there.
Yeah, I think someone said that earlier in the earlier group, that home is maybe more about senses, and I think I would totally agree with that. I mean, you said music, I totally agree with music. I said food. And also a certain smell can totally bounce you back to somewhere. It could be a perfume of someone, could be a perfume of my grandma. Whenever I smell that, I think of my grandma, obviously. And so I think senses are really a main trigger for many people.
So basically there's not just one, that constantly comes back. It's almost like, sort of like, not disturbing, but nagging, slightly nagging. It's like returns. When you are just maybe going through memory, or sort of like having an alone time, I don't know, or going somewhere, there's no one that stands out, because you're just like, okay, you're playing with memories. Yeah, it's like, okay, there's that.
For me, not. There's not one thing that stands out.
No.
For me, neither. I think memories can hit you wherever you are, just like that, and you don't even think of something in particular. It's really just like all these different triggers can lead to you falling back into memory or being a little melancholic. And so I always embrace these moments because, I don't know, most of the times, thankfully, like nice memories.
Yeah.
So.
And I think home also is kind of a moment of comfort, and I think you can feel comfort in many things. So that's why I absolutely agree that so many things can trigger that feeling of comfort, home, being safe, in every second of your life, wherever you are, different places, different moments. So I think there's the feeling of home or being home. There are many levels to it. You know, there is a fixed sense, but there's also something changing, moving. So it is a very complex, I would say, feeling and concept behind it.
Lately for me, I don't know why. It's not even I don't know if it's a memory. It's just something, a particular moment. It takes me to. It doesn't even take me to a place. It takes me to a time, and then an image comes up of me going up a hill when I was like a teenager. I remember. In fact, it's so interesting because it's not the place that I remember, not the hill, but what I was thinking and going through when I was going up the hill. You know, so it goes beyond what the presence of the place. It's not the memory of the place itself,
or physical,
but what was happening inside of me at that particular time. I'm always going back to that time, and I remember that it was when I was traveling in my mind. I was being in places I have never been to before because I was listening to music. I was listening to, and I have been reading books already. And I started having thoughts.
I think now that I think again, I was reading a lot as a child, and although I was kind of fixed to Hamburg, I traveled with all my books to different places, and imagined what it would be if. I don't know, I forget the name of the story, but there was a story with a horse. And I remember myself or imagine myself being maybe in the States, being a child of who owns like a pony hoof. So, you know, I think through my books, when I was young, that's something, books in general, always reminds me, especially also on the time when I was young and I was reading so much and travel to different places, but also I think when you read, you also jump into different characters. So, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, you know, I've also been like thinking about a conversation that I had with Yambu outside this context, and you arrived in Berlin 4 years ago, and this is the first time of leaving Kenya to come to live in another country, right? And I was telling you that I remember, you know, making that journey as well from Nigeria to France in 2004. Can you sort of like talk about what it's been like for you, sort of like all that shift from Kenya to Berlin, and how you've been processing that in the past 4 years? Give a sense.
Yeah, wow.
Because these ones, yeah?
We are listening.
Let's see if they can relate to you.
Well, this shift, it carries a lot. Like, there's a lot of layers to it. But I was like very green. Like I had no idea what I was expecting, what to expect, what I would find in Berlin. I just knew of Berlin from history books, like the basics. So obviously there's a normal culture shock, as we were talking about. But there's also the realization that as soon as you board that plane that is Europe bound, like you cease to be Kenyan, you cease to be African, and you start being black. And I think I was not sure what exactly this means in the bigger sense. Until I was in that plane and I started to feel like the scrutiny, like to be overly scrutinized, and also navigating spaces on the other hand and feeling quite ignored. So it was this question again of visibility of like the black body and having to juggle with sort of these two extremes of either invisibility or hypervisibility, and also something that I realized is that I don't want to handle this passively, because it took me quite a while to also find my footing and to orient myself with my surroundings, like around maybe 2 good years, I think, before actually deciding that this is something I can resist against. I can take control of the gaze, of this feeling of being othered, and to try and also step out of this place of otherness, which also for me means stepping out of a place of the colonial dynamic. So yes, this has been, that was the biggest thing for me, that to try, and it was a struggle for sure, and I'm still going through it in my small little ways. And yeah, I don't know if this resonates at all.
Actually, yeah, it totally does. I mean, like I said, I was born and raised in Germany, and so being other to me was kind of normal. Like, I never really questioned it, because my mom is white, my dad is black, he's African, so everybody knew us because we were the only mixed family like walking around. And so we had always a lot of attention, like not always in a good way, but I was used to being looked at. And I think I actually cope with it very well, because I was a very self-confident child, and I had 3 sisters, and I had my black father, so I did not just grow up in a white household, so that was easier for me, I guess. So I was just used to be different, I guess, but I was fine with it. When I moved to France then, like to Paris, and that was like in my mid-20s, right? So I think that was the first time in my life that I actually felt like, okay, so nobody's actually looking at me. That's cool. I mean, I'm not just a black or a mixed race, whatever woman, I'm also very tall. So sometimes I'm like, okay, they could look at me for whatever reason now. But what I just loved in Paris, and what I still love about Paris, because that's not France, this is really Paris, that there's like tons of people looking like me, like you, like everyone, and nobody pays attention to you. And sticking to Paris like for a while, and then before going back to Cologne for the first time to visit my mom and dad or my sisters, like I don't know, I was probably like 4 or 5 months in Paris, and I was settling and everything, and then I came back to Cologne just to see my family, and I remember going to the tram or using the metro for the first time again in Germany, and I felt like there was a spotlight over my head because people were just looking at me. And then I realized, okay, because no one else is looking like me in the train. And so I had to be 20-something to actually understand that it's not just normal being looked at all the time, that there is actually not safe spaces, but safer spaces than maybe Germany for people who look like us. And just be able to just go with the flow without having the spotlight going on was something that was super important to me to learn.
Yeah, interesting. I wanted to say almost the same, or kind of in that direction. The word hypervisibility or being looked at, or I have to say I was born here, and because I was so used to it, for me, I didn't even notice that I was looked at. Or even if people looked at me, I didn't take it because I looked different. So I had to realize that when I actually went to Ghana for a longer time, in 2011, I think, and no one looked at me. Exactly. I was moving in Ghana, and no one really paid attention. And this is the first time, actually, when I came back, that's when I noticed, actually, yeah, there is a difference being somewhere where almost everybody looks like you, and being at a place where not everybody looks like you. But yeah.
But that's the fun thing, right? You have to come back to a place where you're being looked at all the time. Like if you would just stay somewhere where nobody's paying extra attention to you, then it would just feel normal, and you would not question this like from day to day. You'd be like, yeah, sure, that's my life. You have to come back to that place where people are actually doing that to you.
Doing that for you to realize the
differences.
Yeah,
I felt like I was sleeping. I was like, what? Yeah. So that was like the last 20-something years? Like, okay, fair enough.
Very interesting. I was wondering because you said, you talked about being a self-confident child growing up. What gave you the confidence?
A lot of things, to be honest. Like, I'm very close to my family, and my father, for example, he had a black belt in karate.
Oh, okay.
Like doing
okay,
martial arts. And I remember, like, I was 4 when I was not forced to do martial arts, but it was kind of like, now you're old enough, now you have to start with judo. And then I was like, all right, cool. So I did judo, and then at some point I was old enough to do karate. And I remember my dad being like my coach, like teaching me how to do stuff and preparing me for like championships and that kind of stuff. And that was never really my thing because I'm too soft for this, I guess. Like, I don't want to hit anyone. I don't want to be hit. But I get where he was coming from, because I remember when I wanted to quit, my dad and also my mom, they were like, listen,
you need this.
You need this
to
for many
survive.
reasons, because this world is what it is, okay?
Yeah.
And you are a girl, you're going to be a woman, and you're going to be a woman of color, you're going to be a black woman. So you don't understand now, but one day you'll understand. And I was like, whatever, I want to go dancing or do something else, but I went to do martial arts. And I have to say, being just able to, just knowing that you'd be able to defend yourself, like if something happens, and the whole attitude they teach you when doing martial arts was really empowering, and that my parents actually went with it and said, like, this is important for you. You not understand now, but you will one day. And then, of course, just being with my family together. Like, seriously, I have 3 sisters. We're almost all the same age, so we were very close. And then my parents being just really good parents, as far as I can tell today. So, yeah, I think that made me self-confident in the first place.
I think it's interesting you say this, because for me it would have been like the other way around, because I got to start questioning my confidence when I was in this space where I'm a minority and I'm seen as a minority in a predominantly white space, having grown up in a post-colonial society where there's still these hierarchies of power that exist. And so even with this like scrutiny or being dismissed or ignored, it's those are the things that made me also start to question myself and my worth, because it's like you're constantly trying to prove that actually, oh yes, I come from this place, I know what you know about this place, but I'm not this. I am educated, I am not a threat, I am this. It's like constantly you're trying to prove who you are and who you are not. And this can do things to your mental stability somehow. And yeah, as well as really questioning. I never had to face that before I came here.
Sorry. As I grew up here, and I would say, Germany, Berlin, Hamburg was always my home. I never questioned that. I always saw myself as having more or less one culture. I saw myself as a German girl like everybody else. And I think to really realize also what it means to have a second home was when I went to Ghana and stayed there for a long time and really learn how people, what people in Ghana move, how they feel, how they are. I really had to get to understand what it means to be Ghanaian, or what is Ghanaianness. I mean, this word doesn't exist, but at the moment I stayed there for a longer time, and I realized, okay, these are my people, okay. I took over my second home, because I felt that place. I felt the people. I felt, of course, also family was there, but I had to kind of stay there for a longer time to really understand what it means to have 2 homes. And sometimes also when you follow the medias, they're trying to take away or question how can people have two cultures, 2 identities. Either you're French, either you're German, or how can you be both? And from that moment, and I was like, no, I am German, but I can also be African, and there is no contrast to it.
Yeah,
and
but was it as easy as just accepting it? Was there any sort of like rupture, disturbances, or confusion that came from the fact that, I was born in Hamburg, and I've always thought of myself as having one culture, and then I come here, and I realize that actually I have this culture as well. Is there sort of like any sort of like something you have to readjust about yourself, about who you? I don't want to essentialize anything, but you know what I mean.
I mean, it happened naturally over time, like over 6 months or a year. But I think it's at the end of the day, if you move like all these people as well. So that's a bit maybe not too clear how I described that. But what I mean is, I use the bus as everybody in Ghana. I ate the same food as everybody. I listen to the same music as everybody. So I think becoming part of the society, living the same life every day, like all people in that country live, I think this is something that kind of
carries you in.
Yes.
Become interesting.
And then understanding also how these people think. And yeah, I mean, there's such happy and welcoming people also that you love to take that culture.
It's interesting when you say take,
yeah.
or become. It's more like become, not take. Become. What I find interesting is that it's almost as if between you and Yambu and also Nora, there's all this. First of all, there's a question of visibility, hyper visibility, but at the same time, there is also confidence. And Yambu talks about losing sort of like her confidence being questioned when she now comes into the space. But then you talk about you always having that confidence because of the formation of your family. I also feel like you have that as well. I don't know if the formation of your family is the same as or similar to
but also
Nora.
when you live around people who love you and they make you feel like you can be everything, you can do everything. I think that helped me to have that confidence. There was no one in my family or in my house who said you cannot do this because you're that. So I was super free and I could do what I wanted, and I did what I wanted, to be really honest. So yeah.
What I find interesting is like now there's now the question of how do you go about, because you said something about you don't want to be passive about how you.
I found that interesting too.
It's like you want to sort of like flip that onto its head, and you want to own the agency. That you don't want to be looked at. You want to also look at people when they look at you. You don't want to be this person who's always looked at and constantly reacting to being looked at.
Or at some point questioning who you are, or if this is the place where you belong to.
So I just want to throw it out there, for you, Nora, who's lived in this and feel like you have the confidence to move around in this space. And then for her, who's sort of like very aware of that visibility, whether it's hyper or invisibility, she's very aware of it. How do you go about sort of like making it something proactive for your own, as like your own agency?
Taking it in.
Well, I have to say, like, because the word passive, like, I think I understand what you mean. But sometimes I also feel like that I would describe myself then rather passive about these things, because I learned pretty quickly that the more attention I pay to hypervisibility, for example, or to people staring at me for whatever reason, the more I pay attention to it, the more I actually have to put my energy together for that. I mean, like, if I'm having a good day, let's say, like, I don't know, I'm going out of the house, I'm meeting someone, I have plans, I have a job, whatever, like, this is already, my mind is already set onto something else. And then I have to deal with these like little things that are around me, which are happening like all the time. So I rather shift my focus from that and be, if you want, passive about people staring at me in a weird way, because like that I can keep my energy together and do what I want to do and I'm supposed to do. Because at least being in Germany for now, like I feel like, okay, I'd be so busy if I try to actively do something about these like microaggressions or just the
vibes
stares
and energies around you.
Yeah. And so then whenever you feel like it's too much, that's how I do it normally. Like I would never spend so much time in Germany as I'm doing right now. It's Corona, so I have no choice. But I would just leave. I would go to an island. I would go to somewhere on the continent. Like I'm out. If I feel like this is too much, I'm being seen too much, I'm going somewhere where people look like me, and that's the end of the story. So
move yourself.
Move yourself. Seriously.
Move yourself. Okay.
And just one little thing, like because I think I told you that before. Like when I went to Ghana for the first time, I met this guy, and he was running the hotel that I was staying in, and so I was sitting there having my lunch because I was alone, and then he came and joined me, and he was like, "So you're from Germany?" I said, "Yes, I'm from da-da-da." And so we talked, and so turns out the guy, he's Ghanaian, but he was born and raised in Germany. And I was like, "So how come that you're living here now again? Like, so you didn't feel Germany anymore?" And he said, "You know what, Nora, I'm 40-something years old, and I've done my part. Like, I've been to demonstrations, I've raised my kids, I was trying to prove in the neighborhood that I'm as friendly and clean as everybody else." So he was doing his part in terms of like, let's try to make this a better place, or let's prove to people that we're just people. And he said, "You know what, I'm just tired, I just want to have a good time. So I bought this hotel, my family is coming, like when they're finished with their studies, he wanted to take his kids." And he said, "Cool. Now I'm just going to chill for the rest of my life. Here we have other problems, obviously, but I'm feeling better than I ever did in 40 years in Germany." So, and I just looked at him and I was like, "Yeah, get it. It's okay." So just move yourself from the situation if it's too much.
And take yourself elsewhere. Yambu, how do you deal with this? How do, you are the one who brought this whole idea of the, not being passive about it, and how to flip it around onto itself. This whole idea of the gaze and looking at you. How do you think of it? How do you deal with it in the everyday, or how do you even?
First, I have to say that I thought about this moving option, but then I was wondering, wait, I like Berlin. I like being in Berlin. I don't want to have to remove myself from a city that is giving me so many rich experiences just because of, issues that I can try and affect. And I think also I should have mentioned that I have a career background in activism at the moment. So it's like constantly in resistance, not just with myself and my body, because when I moved here is when I realized my right to exist and my wanting to do so freely and comfortably also is a political act in itself. Just that, like minus the work that I have to do 9 to 5. And so I'm quite interested, and I like also challenging us to try and think about what these isms do to us, because we're usually focused on the fight, the struggle, resisting. But we don't have so many spaces where we talk about what do these things do to us? Like, what does gendered racism, for example, do to the black female body, and how it sees itself and how it moves and how the trauma is manifested. And personally, maybe I can share maybe a small story. Yeah. Because I with all these demos and everything, I found myself my energy getting so depleted, and it can get like so emotionally draining. And inherently, change is like a slow process, and there's the frustration. I get so frustrated with it. So I myself do like small protests. I call them my small protests, where I try and connect with people I would have never connected with, for example, like strangers. And when I feel this gaze, I turn it. I own it, and I'm also like, okay, you see me and I see you. It's not you see me and I feel like I want to hide and I'm anxious. I see you, you see me, and I can use my eye, I can use my lens, I can use my body, I can use my energy to try and flip that. And for example, the other day I was having an evening walk and on this empty street, and there was a lady on her balcony, an elderly lady, and she was just like looking out of the street, relaxing on her balcony. And of course, I was aware I'm the only one passing in the entire street. And as I was about to pass, I felt my body like suddenly stiffen and my jaw was tight and I could immediately feel scrutinized. And as I was about to pass, I stopped, I looked towards her, and I waved. And there was no reaction, no response whatsoever. And I kept standing, and I looked again, and I waved again, smiling. And she goes, "Oh, hello." And I walked away giggling. I mean, that was a small moment, but in that small action, the gaze was stripped of its weight. It was stripped of its power.
Yeah.
And there was like a lasting moment in feeling, you know? And
I would love to ask you, apart from your small actions or small movements that you do, what else do you do to make where you live now yourself a home? So do you have some what do you do to make yourself be feeling at home here? Because you have been here now 4 years. There must be maybe a strategy or something that you do that gives you that comfort of or moments of being home here. If so, that's the question.
Yeah. So for me, home, a great deal of it is comfort. So places where I can exist or that allow me to exist comfortably are places where I can easily call home. Places and things. It could also be a connection in language, like I can meet a Kenyan friend and we're speaking in Sheng, the urban slang, and I immediately feel at home. I've also come to realize that home is also my body, and I try to take care of my body and to find home inside myself,
Home
such
within,
that.
Sprichwort.
Yeah, I mean, the body is my first home. I lived in my mother's womb, and now I have this home that I carry with me wherever I go, or that carries me wherever I go. So it has been really connecting with myself, and also during these pandemic times and where we've had to slow down, just having this feeling of stillness has also allowed me to take a step back and truly understand and love the world more deeply. And also people, community.
Community, I think, is a good word.
Yeah.
Nora.
Interesting.
Yeah. So as Pamela said, I don't know, a while ago I wrote this song that I'm going to play now, which is called Summer Within. And I wrote this after I did a first vacation on my own. I just decided from, the day before I left, I decided that I want to go to Morocco. And so I went to Marrakesh by myself, and I was a bit afraid because, I don't know, I didn't know anything about Morocco, and then going there by myself, first time traveling alone. But I had a great time, and I like to be alone anyways, and I like to just find that feeling of being home, in myself, and that's what the song is about that I'm going to play now.
Never once believed what they told me. Always knew there must be something more. I took a train to see it all. Never been a type of soul to settle. Only on the road I feel alive. I live outside comfort zones. Say I'm on the run and that I'm restless, 'cause I ain't got no area code. Everything I see leaves me breathless, 'cause I know nothing's really set in stone. So I learned to hold my own hand. Home's everywhere that I stand. And when there's no sunlight that shines on my skin, there's always a summer within. So I learned to hold my own hand. Home's everywhere that I stand. And when there's no sunlight that shines on my skin, there's always a summer within. There's always a summer within. Need to be constantly surrounded. Dinner on rooftops for one. I listen to myself carefully. You don't have to show me all the beauty. I see it every time I close my eyes. I'm wandering peacefully. Say I'm on the run and that I'm restless, 'cause I ain't got no area code. Everything I see leaves me breathless, 'cause I know nothing's really set in stone. So I learned to hold my own hands. Home's everywhere that I stand. And when there's no sunlight that shines on my skin, there's always a summer within. There's always a summer within. There's always a summer within.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Thank you.
Wow, your voice just like fills up the whole space, huh?
Thank you so
Amazing.
much.
Love it. And it's
Like
so
a meditation.
Thank you.
It's amazing.
It's beautiful. And of course, for me, I think that's, I often say that sometimes when you see someone who's self-confident and you look at it from the outside, you could easily call it arrogance or show off or anything. But if you ever know what it feels like from the inside, it operates differently. There's a lot of power in it, and there's a lot of beauty in that, because you are able to unlock many things that you are when you are. So in this sense now, when you say, I've learned to hold my hands, it's not that holding my hands that says, I can't hold other people's hands, or I can't stretch out my hands, to join it to other people's hands when there's a need to. It means that I have found that place in me that allows me to unlock myself and just be who I'm supposed to be. It's so powerful. I mean,
Thank you.
That's how I feel, listening to you, because it's in the voice.
It's exactly what I was trying to say with that, to be honest. You perfectly explained everything.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful.
Thank you.
Yes. I'm sorry, the time is running. We are already at 8. And but I felt like that your song really explains or understands how I feel about home. Not everybody feels, maybe has the summer within, or home is wherever he or she stands. But for me, your song perfectly described my vibe, my feeling, my mood, and my understanding of what it means to be at home. So I thank you both, or you all, you two, of course, too, for being that open, sharing your story with us, but also with the space, with this exhibition, and with our audience as well. I hope you also enjoyed it. And yeah, we are unfortunately at the end, and I would also love to thank Gropius Bau for the possibility to have this conversation here, especially in these times where it is so difficult to still have events, exchange with people that are not only your family. So thank you very much, Gropius Bau.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Nora, Yambu, Pamela. We started this, thinking together, and Otobong Nkanga, she's also watching. The artist, and what we've done is basically just to do something gestural. We know that we cannot exhaust the conversation here. We know that we might not even arrive at giving people all the punchlines that they need, to say like, oh, this is a great event. But that's not the point. The point is to be able to be here together. It is...
And to share, and to
it's a performance of togetherness and to feel each other's vibe. I really enjoyed, when watching Yambu, eyes closed, when she was listening to the music right now. And she was just there, really enjoying it. But it wasn't even, this is not the first time. When you were rehearsing, she was already doing that. I was like, this is really good. The energy is good. The fact that both of you are going to come in the same session feels right. For me to see that already feels right. So on that note, I guess I say that's been it.
Thank you very much for having us.